Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard with your host, Bill Stierle. And you know, Bill, a word that has been in the consciousness of a lot of Americans in recent months is tyranny.
Yes.
But I don't know that all of us Americans truly understand what tyranny is. And you've read a book recently, I believe, that
Yes.
really talks about this a great deal. I believe it's called On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. And I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the points the book makes and maybe how we can tie them into what we're seeing in our country currently.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate Tom, and I've really enjoyed and also I have feelings of just being sad and disheartened about and anxious about some of the signs that are showing up that are demonstrating some of the strategies that are being used that are similar to the strategies that were used when other forms of tyranny got started. The strategies of language, the strategies of what happens in the legal system, what happens to institutions, what happens to professional ethics. All of these things lead us down a path that most Americans can't see, that we're getting shoved down this road toward tyranny, and it's very, very unsettling because a lot of times people don't know when the last meaningful vote is that they took in a country that has been taken over by tyranny. I mean, the last meaningful vote in Russia was 1990. That was the last meaningful vote, because once all the systems are focused underneath one authoritarian leader, then it becomes really hard to get an honest discussion, because any kind of dissension is being shut down, or any kind of freedom is being taken advantage. And it's always about the good of the state rather than a human right, or what is the value of for a country to stand for certain ethics and principles. So very, very, sad and disheartening, that when these kinds of principles move forward, it's really, really hard.
Well, and so let's just quickly, for our listeners, just the quick definition of tyranny, okay, which is a noun, is cruel and oppressive government rule, or a similar definition is a nation under cruel and oppressive government. So then, in another way, it's referred to as cruel, unreasonable, or arbitrary use of power or control. I find that last one very interesting.
Oh boy, aren't we seeing that one right there? In Portland and Chicago, and that's arbitrary. It's an arbitrary action.
Right.
It's not trying to manage. It's in the book. It's like these authoritarians. What they're doing is that they move around and respond to crises, and it looks like that they're managing the crises, but all they're doing is they're leveraging the crisis into power. So they could take a small crisis and say, hey, I handled that. And all the followers go, yeah, you handled that. But on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a very small crisis, or it was not very meaningful, the action that they took. there's not meaningful action being taken in Portland to stop the groups, because otherwise the people of Oregon and Portland would have asked the federal government to have help. Hey, listen, our people are rebelling over here and we just need the citizens to be protected. There was no request that was made of the federal government. There was a request made for PPE, for PPP, for the protection stuff, but there was not a request for paramilitaries, unmarked law enforcement or federal agents to come in. There was no request for that. So the government, the federal government, is to respond to the state's requests, not to come in and arbitrarily come in on that. So I really appreciate your your intuition, because we've got a clear example.
Well, I think there are lots of examples, sure, but maybe before we get to examples in our current society, in our country today, are there a couple of examples from the book you want to share of past examples of tyranny? Is there anything there that would be helpful?
Well, the one that really sticks out is that somebody that is in the place of tyranny needs normal people to help them. They need the regular police. They need the regular judges. They need the regular citizens to make a pass on something that's abhorrent. So, for example, Tom, if I came down to Orange County and I started putting symbols on certain houses that represented one group and symbols on another set of houses and stores that represented another group, and said, this group is more valuable and this group is less valuable. This is more valuable, this is less valuable. So if we come down into an area and start the language of division, and then start assigning value to one side or another, instead of this is what America is standing for and this is what we're going to do together, that's a sign of tyranny. It's and with the president's speech the other last night in Texas was exactly that. They're evil people. They're sick. Those Democrats are sick. They're going to create chaos. They're going to do that. All of that is right out of the playbook of tyranny. It's right out of the playbook of tyranny. So it's now somebody that's going to listen to this might think that Bill, you're picking a side, you're like doing that, and actually I'm just referring to how language is used. It's the language of inclusion is not the language of us versus them inside our own country, because then it makes it easy for one group of people to say, wait a minute, the president said that this group of people is going to hurt us, therefore we get to defend and hurt them first. That's not a part of the rule of law. Yes, you have a right to protect yourself, but not a proactive right to take somebody's life on an assumption they might hurt you.
Oh, now we're getting into pre-crime of like Minority Report or something there, right?
Yeah, you just drifted into. That's right. It's a pre-crime. You thought it, therefore. It's like there's a group of people marching down your street, and you might be feeling scared, but they're just marching down the street, holding signs and making noise. Yeah, but I don't like it. They're infringing on my rights. It's like, I think they're working on the First Amendment right now. They're doing freedom of speech, which you have a freedom of speech too, but not the freedom to act in a violent way with them physically. You don't get that one.
Well, actually,
get that one.
What's slightly related to this that came to mind there is, I forget, was it in Georgia? I forget what state it was, but there was a peaceful Black Lives Matter protest going on where this couple and their home were not liking the protest, and they stood outside their home brandishing firearms and actually pointing firearms at the people. Didn't fire any firearms. They didn't actually physically hurt anybody, but that they actually were brought up on charges because they broke a law by brandishing those firearms and making threatening motions, gestures, if you will, toward the peaceful protesters. So it's very interesting how that happened.
Tom, if there's a group of college students in the house next to you making noise, tapping on their door with a gun might not be a really good idea for you.
It probably wouldn't be
it's not a
productive move. Yeah.
Now we can ask the police officers to protect and serve, and ask them to meet the need for consideration between neighbors. Hey, you guys are making a heck of a lot of noise in here. And with that heck of a lot of noise, we really would like peace and consideration. Please don't have us come back here again, because we're going to need to come back here again. And that's not, we really don't want to do that. You make that call. Tom, you can make that call. But really, the thought that I can take the law into my own hands is also a part of tyranny. It's that I am empowered to enforce and interpret the laws the way I see that. And regrettably, the internet has reinforced that. My viewpoint is more valuable than the truth of my viewpoint. This is not a good thing. And that's how you get tyranny to move. It's my truth, my viewpoint gets to supersede things, my opinion. So you can put doctors on on a video, which just happened recently, and say, and these doctors are all saying this is the thing and this is to use, and what winds up happening is that who's ever in that group, there is a range of respect and research and experience in that group. Some of them are going to be maybe like, no, I have a good piece of information for everybody to consider that can really be helpful. And then there's somebody that might come on and says, well, I have a piece of information and I'm going to promote my viewpoint. Meanwhile, I'm not really speaking fully from a piece of research evidence. And this is very, very difficult. I mean, we can get into discussion about placebos. We can get a discussion about spontaneous healings. We can get all kinds of interesting side collateral things. Yet the big systems cannot give a head nod to that as a protective strategy. They can't do that. They have to say, this is the evidence the way we see it and the way we have measured it. That's what they get to do. Everybody else can have their opinion. Okay.
Well, Bill, so are there some, I believe the book covers a lot of different aspects or indicators of tyranny, qualities of tyranny, maybe. Are there a few that it would make sense to review and highlight?
Oh, yeah, let's do the first one I'm thinking about is professional ethics. That one is really so significant. And we're not at that place, but there is messaging that is coming in this place. One of the things that happened in Nazi Germany is that they started talking negatively about the universities and the professors.
Okay.
And we have that now. We have it that somehow the places of learning, discovery, and research are an institute to cultivate liberal points of view, where there is no measured evidence about that. There's subjective evidence, but there is no measured evidence that if you go to college, you become more liberal or more conservative. That doesn't match. Clearly, look at all the Republicans that are senators that all have degrees. And for them to call those professors elites because they've studied at top universities, and they were the ones that studied at top universities, and that's their tribe, it's a little bit bias, disconnected. It's like you can't have those two things together, you guys. You can't like run under the cover for this. Well, they do both. They do say they're, and because a tyranny does not value a rigorous discussion of fact and research. It doesn't want to hide. It can't hide on that. It's just too difficult. It's literally too difficult for a person of tyranny to face it, because the person that's in tyranny just gets to say the following sentence: well, that wasn't my experience about taking the medicine. My experience was I took it for 2 weeks and look, I didn't get it. It's like, you're not a sample. One person is not a sample. We have this research that tested 535 and said it didn't make any damn bit of difference. That's a sample. Now, if you would like 1,000 people, we can increase the sample. But the ones we measured, this is the numbers we got at it, and it didn't move the needle. It didn't help them with this, it didn't help them with this, it didn't help them with this. So if there was one thing to really go after is to, when professional ethics, what the profession stands for is not fought for anymore, that's how you know that tyranny shows up. So, Tom, would you hire somebody just because they like you for a position in your company, but they really didn't study or don't have any skills in that position? Would you hire them just because they were nice? No,
I wouldn't hire them because of that. I'm in business to accomplish things, not to have people give me adoration.
Right. So with that in mind, if the Senate approves 250 judges, and many of those judges or some of those judges don't really have any experience or skill at being a judge, and just because they're Republican or wrote a nice letter or acknowledgement to President Trump, they get to have the job as a judge, and they don't know what they're doing, that's a form of tyranny. Oh, and the other attorneys and judges don't say anything about it or don't stand up to it in a significant way, because that's where the rebellion rebellion is not the right word. That's how America is to stand up for itself. Here's an example. During the Polish solidarity movement, where the labor unions fought back, and
Lech Walesa and the whole thing. Yeah.
All those folks. Yes. So during that time, the reason why that was able to move is because the professors and the attorneys and the common people stood with the workers. And the workers wanted to vote on things, and the attorneys and the professors and the managers and other business things says, yes, we're going this way. And as soon as that flopped over, and the Communist Party made an agreement with it, within just a few short years, the Communist Party was not in charge anymore. Because you need professionals to stand up with professional ethics.
It seems we are sorely lacking that
We are
what's the word,
sorely
lacking that action in the
Mhm.
United States right now. I mean, especially in
Yeah,
the
they're picking us
Justice
off.
Department, really. With
Mhm.
look at, I mean, looking at Bill Barr and his actions, they seem to be, in terms of professional ethics, he's, to put it nicely, blurring the lines of that
Yeah.
significantly,
He's sort
isn't
of legally right, but not really. He's not doing standing up to professional ethics. He's not living up to be the top law enforcer. What he's doing is saying, how can I find the minimalist way of agreeing to this question and say, I'll follow the law, but really, actually, what I'm going to do is follow the law while these other people are adjusting the law. And then I'm just going to support them and I'm not going to hold professional ethics. It's not like that there hasn't been attorneys and law schools and professional things screaming in his direction. They just haven't all came together in a unified voice enough to rise to the level. They haven't said, my needs as an individual, I've got to put a little skin in the game, because otherwise this guy's going to take away more of my needs for freedom, more of my needs for expression. I can't even hold my head up high in the professional ethical place, because I didn't fight for the professional ethics that I swore in with, when I took the bar and when I when I became an attorney. Same as the doctors. Hey, we have these dozen doctors showing up. Their video goes viral, several million views, and all of a sudden their opinion gets to be higher than all the research. How does that work? Because they're playing into bias and they're playing into the
Sure,
things.
it's
That's
the
not public
opinion that
policy.
some people want to hear despite the truth.
Yeah. So we've got same thing with educators have been diminished like this. Schools have been underfunded for years. We're not respecting teachers. We don't respect teachers. We just take more and more away from them. Well, we're going to take your pension away. Well, we're going to make it harder for you to stay in things. Well, we're going to depress your, the pay rates. Well, in order to make it go, and it's race to the bottom language. It's like we're turning into that second world oligarchy kind of experience. Now, if the entire nation wants to have that experience, then all of a sudden we'll work our way back to having the monarch and the nobles and these governors actually own their territories, and they get to kind of grift off of everybody that lives in the state. See how unsettling that is?
I don't think Americans would like the idea of that too much.
No. Yeah, but they're sort of doing it right now, right?
Yeah, certainly no term limits contribute to this. I mean, there's all
No
sorts
term
of things
limits.
that contribute to
They're
it.
voting for their own salary, and they get to
Right.
they get to vote on, they get to still have their salary. They get to have health care. Other people don't get to have health care. See, it's the unequal thing, and language wise, what winds up happening if we don't, and we got to turn this into an optimistic conversation, because there's been days and hours that I've spent in like, how the heck are we going to get out of this thing? Like, it's how are we going to step into re-energizing our voice, so we're starting about the collective good, instead of trying to support one or two values that are not in alignment with what the country stand for. Here's a value that one people promote. Why are you taxing the rich? They earn their money. That's not the country they're living in. They're living in a country that the system allowed them to make their money and work hard and use that, but it's not there. We're all in this together. They just were worked hard enough or were smart enough to figure out how to make it work for them. I don't think there's a lot of earning going on in there. They get to keep their money, or they get to keep a higher percentage because they got to the top of the list. This is where it gets unsettling, because our language fails us. Our beliefs keep us trapped on the small issue and not focus on the greater vision. It's really hard.
It is hard. It is hard. Well, professional ethics is very interesting to and I think easy to see how professional ethics have not been, they haven't been stood up for so much right now.
They haven't been stood up for. They haven't been stood up for is that if you're studying for something and you get a degree, why is it that this teacher with the degree and all the stuff, or this dentist or this thing, all of a sudden with the level of debt they have, now all of a sudden they're kind of trapped with that. And meanwhile, somebody that's working around the margins and things like that from a business place are going like, well, I'm not studying that. There's no revenue there. It's a lot easier to steal it over here than to work it through it ethically here. It's not a setting up for people to be a healthy participant in society. And that's the thing think about it this way. If you and I are at a party and somebody comes up to us and says, I'm a teacher, and the next person that comes up to us and says, well, I'm an attorney, where does the need for respect go? Over there. Meanwhile, who's the one who's, slugging it out with 30 to 120 kids a day?
Yeah, I think teachers definitely don't get as much respect as other professions. To try to bring some sort of closure to this professional ethics thing, because I think it's really important, is, you have, I think, this example of Bill Barr, who's an attorney, and they had the Mueller report came out, and instead of letting it come out, he gets it in advance and he writes this summary to frame it the way he wanted it to be viewed and the way he wanted the president to be viewed. I mean, that trampled over professional ethics in so many ways, right? That's a really good example. Whether you believe the Mueller report was properly done or not, and I think there's plenty of evidence actually to say that it was properly done, but even so, for him to act like that way crossed the line of professional ethics, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. The best metaphor that I can have is that it's like taking a tasty dessert that's made with a type of creme brulee or pudding or something that's a parfait, and saying, you know what, we're just going to keep pouring milk into this thing until we dilute it out, so that you really can't see where the flavor, what's the important ingredient, because we're just going to level it out with language and summarize it in such a way that it's going to cause confusion and doubt and skepticism about the validity, because you have the belief, because I'm the person in charge, that I'm not going to lie to you. And oh, by the way, I'm not really lying to you, but I am thinning it out. But I am legal, but it's not really fully accurate. And so this is why we have a criminal set of laws and we have an ethical set of standards. And you and I have talked about truth regarding this, and these two things get collapsed. And that's one of the things that tyranny does, is that it says to this attorney or this judge, watch how unsettling this gets. that because I believe in the leadership or the state, then I get to make what's criminal to match my narrative. And that's what the Nazi judges did, is they made it justifiable because it fit the state policy. And they collapsed ethical standards, because the judges would have stood up if the said, wait a minute, we're not doing it. Here's another one. There's a rule in the United States that the person that's getting operated on has to give consent. That's a professional ethic.
Sure.
You cannot operate on somebody until they sign off on the operation. So far, so good?
Yes.
Yeah. In Nazi Germany, they abolished that. So then the state says, no, there's certain people that we get to operate on, and they don't have to give us a consent. So we can do this test on them. We can do this thing to them. We can do this thing. And it's like, and then the doctors, because it's good for the state, it's now professionally ethical. No, it's not. Because they spent time dehumanizing certain groups of people, so they got to make up a
and similarly, that's like, the ethical boundaries were crossed when the federal government agencies cleared Lafayette Square, so the president could stand in front of the church holding a Bible. And of course, there was a hearing about that in Congress, in the Judiciary Committee of the House this past week, and Barr was questioned on that, and he just kept, wiggling his way around, saying, "Oh, well, no, tear gas wasn't used," trying to argue the semantics of what tear gas is, and somehow trying to justify, like you were just saying, the action that took place there that trampled on individuals' rights.
I was always surprised when my dad would say the sentence when I was growing up, "Hey, cut that out," when I would talk in a way that was not in a line, was not helpful to me or to others. He would just literally call me out and said, "Hey, cut that out." And of course it was my dad that did that, right?
Right.
The professional decorum in the while these various different trials are going on, or these inquiries are going on, I just want somebody to just stop and say, "Hey, cut that out. What you're doing is unethical. It may be true, and it's partially true for the law, but it is not in alignment with professional standards. Please, somebody start calling people out for not following professional standards, for not it's language malpractice is the best way I can describe it. It's language malpractice to allow them to get away with it. It's not holding a person accountable. Hey, what comes out of your mouth means something, and you can open it up out of your mouth, but I am going to call you out on it. And that's one of the things from the book on tyranny that the public has to do. They have to start, respected professionals got to go, "Hey, cut this out." But a lot of the folks, and the same with any time you're dealing with a big system, you don't want to stick your head up, because then the other folks are going to take shots at you. Just take a look at Facebook. All you got to do is put a post on there,
and
all of a sudden you get people taking sniper shots at you.
You definitely do, a lot of the
time.
And
I think, Tom, I think we've talked about the tyranny piece a bunch. I think we probably need to come back here and figure out how to ways to clean it up, and take these different languaging constructs and taking these different events in history that are taking place right now, and go like, well, If I was a congressperson, I wouldn't have asked the question this way in an upset tone. I would have asked it this way in a compassionate tone, and then just let him fall on the sword rather than him.
And you know what? That's what's sorely missing, because I watched highlights from that, House Judiciary Committee meeting, and it was really disappointing to me, discouraging, and in some ways infuriating, because everybody, and on both sides of the aisle, seriously, both Democrats and Republicans, are not asking questions to reveal truth. They're asking questions to get a soundbite, which you and I have talked about in the past. They're trying to get a soundbite that they can be aired back home in their state or their district to score some political points. And to me, that was really, in a lot of ways, I mean, just disappointing and disgusting, quite honestly, because it's not helpful. Nobody in that hearing room, the people asking the questions or the person that was testifying, were helping the country in any way. I felt.
Yeah.
It was so
sad. And I really don't want 2016 to be the last year that we had a meaningful vote. I really don't want to. I don't want 2016, because if we're not on the country narrative, if we don't cultivate the country narrative and boost, reinforce, start cutting our teeth on professional ethics. And this is at all levels. So you could see how this is going to translate, right? Police for professional ethics, human rights professional ethics, legal professional ethics, medical professional ethics, insurance professional ethics. We could put it in just about any category, as like, because as soon as the level of thing is going to be lowered, then what winds up happening is that allows all kinds of really junky stuff to take place. But more to come on this, right?
All right. Yeah, I like it. Let's do that. We'll review some of the questions some of the representatives asked in the hearing on both sides of the aisle, and then let's talk about how that could have been done differently to actually achieve an ethical and maybe productive result. Does that sound good?
That sounds great, Tom. Awesome.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.